Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. This is, I think, let's see, it's May.
75, I saw.
Yeah, 75, and this is like the fifth one so far in 2025, and we're gonna have a sixth one before the end of the month. So, and that one also is being led by Dr. Estes. So we're really, really excited how the series is going this year, and 75 is a milestone. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to Doctors Estes, Ren, and Zhang. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you guys and introduce your topic. So Dr. Molly Estes completed her residency at Stanford Kaiser EM program and her fellowship in medical education also at Stanford. She works as an assistant professor and clerkship director at Northwestern University. She is the recipient of the AAEM Young Educators Award, the Joe Lex Educator of the Year Award, and the AAEM Women in Emergency Medicine Young Leader Award. Dr. Estes is involved in CME and conference planning for AAEM and for CORD, and she participates in both the AAEM Women in EM Women's Wisdom podcast, as well as EM Over Easy. She has a passion for teaching, and her current research involves curriculum design in education. Next is Dr. Ronnie Wren. So he is a assistant professor and clerkship director of emergency medicine at the University of Florida, Gainesville. He holds a BS in mechanical engineering from Rice University and an MD from Baylor College of Medicine. He completed his EM residency at UT Health San Antonio, where he served as chief resident, followed by a medical education fellowship at UMass Bay State and an MS-Ed from the University of Pennsylvania. Before joining UF, Dr. Wren was on faculty at the University of Massachusetts, and his academic interests include gamification, medical student advising, mentorship, and professional identity formation. Inspired by mentors who supported his journey alongside his physician wife's training, he actively gives back through the leadership roles that he participates in organizations such as the Texas College of Emergency Physicians, EMRA, and the AAMC. He's currently co-chair for the CORD Advising Students Committee, developing evidence-based guidance for EM applicants. And then finally, we have Dr. Tony Zhang, who is an associate professor and clerkship director of EM at the Thomas Jefferson University. A triple graduate of Tufts University, he earned his BS in mechanical engineering, an MS in biomedical engineering, and an MD through an intensive 9-year interdisciplinary program. He completed his EM residency at Brown University, where he was a leader in medical education and chaired the EMRA Simulation Committee, establishing enduring grant opportunities. In 2023, Dr. Zhang earned his MHPE, further solidifying his commitment to academic medicine. He's recognized for his innovative contributions to curriculum development, teaching, community service, and medical invention. His national leadership includes serving as co-chair of the CORD Advising Students Committee, reflecting his expertise in student advising. And his academic interests also include gamification, implicit bias, simulation, interprofessional education, and mentorship. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for being here. And today our session is entitled Just-in-Time Advising for the Application Season, Tips and Tricks every physician needs to know.
Mary, you're so incredibly kind. The three of us were just kind of expecting more of that, and here they be, as opposed to the full bio introduction. So thank you for that. That was really, really nice of you. And hello to everybody who is on the call right now. We are so excited to be able to meet with you. We actually recognize more than a couple of the names who are on the call. So it's kind of hilarious that we are giving advice for how to advise to so many people who we know are already amazing advisors out there. But our intent and goal behind this conversation is going to be for those people who are advising medical students, it is that time of year again. What are the things that your students are potentially going to be asking you? And what are the things that you need to know in order to help your students get from point A to point B, which is successfully matching into emergency medicine? So as you heard, all three of us are clerkship directors in emergency medicine. All three of us have been extensively involved in the advising students committee in emergency medicine. So Cord's branch of all things medical student. All three of us have been involved with CDEM through SAEM. And so we're here to be able to share with you all our hard fought knowledge and expertise when it comes to helping our students get to where they go. Oh, and here's a cat.
Ah,
I tried to lock them outside the room about 30 minutes ago, and there was plaintive yelling and singing of the ancestor song outside the door. So we're going to just pretend that that didn't happen. Ronnie and Tony, thanks for letting me volunteer you into having this chat with us today. Appreciate it.
We are so glad to join y'all. For those who don't know, the three of us are kind of like three musketeers. We met during COVID, and I'm very wary of, networking, online networking, but I'm I also say the two of my closest friends outside of school I met through Zoom. So here we are.
Here we be. It's great. Um, we have our list of go-to topics that we're going to kind of chat about betwixt the three of us. Obviously, this conversation is going to go a lot farther and be way more interesting if those of you who are on the call go ahead and like throw your questions into the chat. We're happy to field them and let the conversation go where it's naturally going to need to go over the course of the next 50-ish minutes or so. And we're just going to kind of take it from the top, if that sounds good to everybody on the call. Sound good to you too?
May I just give a quick disclaimer, Molly?
Please, by
So,
all means, Tony, take it away.
as you can see, the red dot that says this is a recording is, in fact, this is a recorded session. However, given that the audience are highly educated physicians, I expect and hope that we are going to talk about some spicy topics as our students will ask us these highly contentious processes. And I think together we need to be able to come up with a neutral answer, take away our own bias. The three of us here have had different experiences in residency training. We've practiced medicine at different parts of the country. So when we talk about it, we have our own opinions and we can discuss them pros and cons. And I think ultimately the goal of this is not to have a how's the weather in Philadelphia. It's bad, but a more as much evidence base as possible and keep the unknown unknown. Like our job really here is to give advising, leave our emotions and opinions on the side and try to help the students ultimately match. And that's kind of what we're here for, is to give you advice on how to say things that you either don't know or feel strongly towards. But yeah, are we doing a Q&A, or I assume that's probably the
I was gonna say I'm gonna take it away. We're gonna see where this goes. So for those of you who absolutely love objectives to your PowerPoint lectures, we don't have slides for you. We decided to nix the slides in favor of having a more off the cuff conversation, off the cuff guided conversation. But for those of you who like ideas of where we're going, our goal today is to tackle first and foremost, what are the questions that students are asking as they're considering even beginning down the journey to applying into emergency medicine? What are some of the just normal standard things over the course of the application cycle, the details that you have to know in order to make sure that your students are well informed as they're getting into leading up into interview season and surviving through interview season. And then lastly, the very last thing that we want to talk about is we've come up with some like pretty common advising scenarios, at least ones that all three of us have seen on a pretty routine basis. And we want to spend a little bit of time just kind of talking through those scenarios so that way you can see our thought processes and how we would approach some of this stuff for our students. So with all that being said, without any further ado, we're going to jump right on in. And like I said, the first part of the conversation is hot takes. So hot takes, number one, students are still asking me about the workforce study. They still are. And no, it's not because they're getting the information from their dean's offices, but it's because they're hearing it from other specialties. Well, haven't you heard? Emergency medicine's not going to have any jobs in, now T-minus 5 years and counting. What are your guys' approach to answering this question for your students? How are you still fielding the questions about the workforce study?
Is this for Ronnie and me or for everyone else to?
Oh no, this is for you and Ronnie. This is for
Okay.
you and Ronnie. We'll chat amongst ourselves. We'll see what people put in the chat. So please participate in the chat.
I think first and foremost, you have to acknowledge that the study exists and there was a significant concern that impacted how students apply to emergency medicine. We had an apocalypse back in 2022 and everyone was freaking out. So it's real, it happened, the study came out. But I think since then, the big thing I try to reassure students are that there were some faults in the methodology and some of the results and what we interpreted from those results were probably a little bit overblown, and that there are definitely jobs out there. And from this lived experience standpoint, I still get calls every single day from recruiters. Hey, do you want to go work here and here and here? I think the big thing for everyone to kind of recognize, and I think this is true to any specialty, is that the jobs that everyone wants to get in the most desirable locations and the most ideal setup is it has been and it will continue to be very, very competitive. And you might not get your dream job right out of residency. So the best thing you can do for yourself is to make sure you get into the best residency program you can get into, build the best CV you can build for yourself, and do all the right things to get the end result that you want. That's how you got into medical school. That's what you're going to do to get into the best residency. And that's what you're going to have to do to get the best job that you want. And ultimately, you're going to get there as long as you keep working toward the end goal.
When I used to live and practice in California, I would make the very tongue-in-cheek joke that nobody comes out of residency and gets the cush job in La Jolla. I've got to come up with some sort of comparable gold standard living situation now that I'm living and practicing in Illinois. Tony, what about you? What's your hot take on how to answer the question about, hey, Dr. Zhang, I'm really considering a job in emergency medicine, but I hear that there are no jobs available.
So number one, this is the elephant in the room, is that I can't believe it's in 5 years. It's like when this study came out in 2021, I was like, it's not gonna happen. It's like Y2K. It's like, seriously, it's not gonna happen. I've proven this group of colleagues can understand Y2K and remember what Y2K is. But then it's like I'm having this conversation like, oh no. That is this like this current MS1 will have this problem. It's like this is a real problem coming in hypothetically. Now, to answer your question, Molly, and this is to add what Ronnie is saying, is that I think there's two approaches to that. It's either we take reviewer number two's perception of the study and talk about the methodology, the APP, the recidivism, and all that stuff, and there are subsequent studies that debunk it, and then other subsequent studies support it. That's one way of slicing through the data. The other thing I do tell the student, and this is the contribution to Molly of how do I tell the students in terms of their job opportunity, I just say, back in the day when I started, when I was applying for EM, it was always you can be a doctor like anywhere you want, right? And now the perception might be you should be able to be a doctor somewhere. Like you should be able to be an EM physician somewhere in the US. That should not be the problem. And I think that's the perception I have, is having not a crystal ball to say, this is a hypothetical study based on data and projections, and that yes, if things continue the way they are, then there will be a concern for job availability. However, I think what it basically does is that in the past, it really changed our perception of how hot EM is. And then it was like a cold shower. And it's like, no, cool off. It's not all great. It's like anesthesia. Right now, anesthesia is super hot. But who knows when that cold shower is going to come and then people realize, oh my God, there's an amazing job opportunity. If there's any anesthesiologists in here, I good for you. The idea is that like at some point, all things need to cool down, and we are in the cool down period. But nevertheless, I still tell students from a recommendation and advising, and that look, I can't ignore the fact this data exists. However, if you like EM and you're good at it, you're going to be good. You know, it's like you're going to be fine. Like if you are a good student, and this is like where I put on the harsh Asian dad conversation, is that if you're going to be a good student, you're going to be a good resident, you're going to be a good doctor. Like work hard and you will find a good job, right? It's like it's one of those things where it's not going to be a cakewalk anymore, and you're going to have to put in the effort. It's kind of how I tell my med students: you want to honor this rotation, you put in the work. And that's it's a lot. I do a lot more tough love now, especially, and I'm sure Molly may suggest this later, is that if you look at the NMRP data and the number of EM applicants and also the spots that are available, it looks like we're doing this kind of thing. So I don't know how competitive EM is going to be in 2026 when we look at the data. I mean, the way that the spots are running out, I feel like we're going to be hitting a new set of like EM is competitive again. So this is the part where that does parallel with my tough talk of it's going to be hard and it might be more competitive. So if that is deterring your interest in EM, this is a good time to think about whether EM is the right field for you. And I tell it to them straight up, and I say, you know, and I encourage them to look at social media. And in this particular case, I'm referring to the show Pitt, not like Twitter, because I think the Pitt, while it is in case people have strong feelings about the Pitt, while the Pitt may have very exaggerated things that happen within 15 hours of this poor person's shift, it does reflect a lot of the chaos, the burnout, the tolls on the human body. And I tell the students who are like, if the students that ask me the question, hey, I'm worried about the workforce, those are the students that might actually not know the real tolls of being an EM physician. And I tell them, watch this series if you have available to it and see if it makes you want to deter, because that, if you don't want to do that, then don't worry. You're not even have to worry about the workforce. The workforce study are the people who are like, I have been eating, drinking, pooping, and peeing EM for the last 4 years. I just want to know, will this affect me? I'm like, you do not have to worry about it because it doesn't matter. You're on this boat anyway. You're on the accelerated bus. Sorry, I keep on talking. I'm going to mute myself.
I love it. I love it. I love all the things that you have to say. I completely agree with both of you. I think the only other thing that I'll throw in there that I oftentimes will tell my students is, and a huge shout out to all of the programs that are doing this, the Emergency Medicine Task Force that is doing this, the Match Task Force that is doing this, and every organization out there who's doing this. But we've been doing a very concerted job over the last couple of years of publicizing where our graduates go to. So where are emergency medicine residency graduates getting jobs? What careers are they taking? What is the first step for them post their training program? And so I'll point my students towards all this data that we have out there. And I'm like, look, we go everywhere. What our graduates decide to do is based off of their interests, based off of the myriad of other, factors that go into life. But you're not going to have to worry about being pigeonholed into one specific thing because that's the only thing that's available to you. All right, so hot take number 2. And Tony, you kind of like set me up for this one. So thank you. I'll pay you later. There's maybe a bottle of scotch coming your way. But let's talk about burnout. So since I was applying into emergency medicine, this has been like one of the top questions from students for the specialty, right? So what do you say about burnout? Students come to you, hey, emergency medicine is consistently within the top 5, usually the top 3 ranked most burned out specialties out there. Why would I want to sign up for that?
So I'm just going to read Mark's comments and comment to us to not be airing our dirty laundry in front of students, which I actually do agree. I think there's a lot of burnout that we exemplify as attending that, as one of my mentors once says, you can bleep this out, but the shit kind of flows downhill and everyone is going to feel it if you are a bad player and all this. As you can tell, I'm a very honest and transparent mentor. So I completely agree. I think that I'm very passionate about, everyone here is very passionate about emergency medicine. I'm very passionate about emergency medicine. But I think as mentors, I also, especially with students recently, I tell them, look, data is data. And I say this because as I get older year by year, I feel that data day by day. It's like, hey, why aren't there so many older EM physicians? I used to think 10 years ago, that will never happen to me. And then yesterday I sat down and I heard the creaks of my knees and my back, and I was like, ugh. And I realized, oh my God, I'm that guy that says, ugh, when I sit down. And I think data is important, right? And I think it's very important for us to be transparent to say, well, we may not be burnt out because we have other things that balance our clinical responsibilities, our academic responsibilities. There is data that says we are the best at burnout, and I think you cannot go into this job thinking that you are the minority, that the data does not apply to you. And then I start the conversation. I tell them, how does this mean? What does this mean to you then? Because I tell them, Dr. Zhang, what are your thoughts on burnout? And I say, I love my job. I find things to do, but I'm also not the representation of every community doc out there, right? If you think about it, I am not that person. And I will also tell you, based on the majority of the surveys and the data that's out there, is that most of us, we're the most burned out by numbers. And I think that's important. And I think it is equally important that as you go and choose to proceed this particular journey into a career and profession, that you acknowledge this as a potential thing you're going to have to address, and you need to pre-plan how to maintain your wellness. And it's a marathon. You cannot sprint through emergency medicine and think you'll be done, because then you might be like one of my colleagues who are not recertifying for their 10-year exam, right? Like, this is real. I have friends of mine, I'll just for HIPAA purposes, like, keep it within the last 5 years, like, for my graduation time, who are choosing not to recertify for the EM exam, or considering just not doing it. It's like, screw it, it's too much. And that's less than 10 years post residency residency completion. So it is real. I just tell them data is there. This is what I do to protect myself. And you might experience this when you are a physician out in the world. There's no reason to say, I used to say like, oh, it doesn't exist. And I realized that's more harmful than good. But Ronnie, I hot potato to you.
No, it's good. I will frequently give my students a little bit of information, like, hey, so these are some of the reasons why people do come out and get burned out really, really fast. Like, to think that you're going to come out of residency, work 22 shifts a month, buy a new car, a new house, a new boat, all at the same time, and then end up, with a bunch of financial debt. No, there are certain things we do to ourselves that contributes to burnout, but the job is hard. And I give a spiel very similar to what Tony just said, and I'll oftentimes add on to it. We are very aware of burnout. Our trainees these days get more and more information and training and resources, both for our trainees and ourselves as faculty, to help with burnout than we have at any other point ever in the history of our specialty. So yeah, it does exist. Yeah, you need to be prepared for it. Everybody goes through points, no matter what your profession is, where you hate your job. But realize that you will be equipped to be able to hopefully recognize and handle it when it happens to you, not if it happens to you. Ronnie, if you've got a different perspective, go for it. Otherwise, we'll go on to my third, hot take point of the conversation.
I completely agree with all of you in that, like, I think from the perspective of being a faculty and advisor, it's really important for us to contextualize these things, right? Kind of help guide students in how to interpret these data. And as Molly, you said, like, why do you think what's contributing to burnout? I think when I was coming up in emergency medicine as a student, I always felt it's such a cop-out answer when people said, oh, our burnout data is so bad because there are all these old farts who didn't train in emergency medicine practicing EM, and they're also burnt out. And you're choosing EM, so you're not going to be burnt out. And that's clearly not true, because there are so many things that are contributing to the stress of the practice. And I think it's really important for us to kind of communicate values, like what is important in the practice of emergency medicine, what is important to you, what gives you a sense of purpose, and does that align with the practice of emergency medicine, and is this something that you can maintain throughout your career through residency when things are really tough? I think those are the things that, and how you manage that throughout your career, throughout your life, is going to be what really helps mitigate burnout in the long run. Hopefully people who are getting interested in EM for lifestyle reasons will start kind of thinking a little bit harder about how they're going to manage that. I think So in some way, I am a little bit cautiously optimistic that we are getting more people who are in going to EM for the right reasons.
So our last difficult topic that we're going to tackle, and I'm going to like caveat this part of the conversation hardcore. In fact, I'm going to give us a time limit. We've got 4 minutes to get through this one, guys. Okay.
Oh boy.
So students are asking about the RRC changes. They are. As of right now, we do not know what's going to happen with these changes, right? So we've gone through the open response period. We're now in the entire review period. All of us will find out together exactly what's going to come down the pipeline. But students are still asking us. So what is your blanket statement that you are telling students about this period of change in time that we are experiencing currently as a specialty? Ronnie, you go first.
I think, well, first and foremost, I always think it's funny. We've been going through a lot of changes as a specialty. I feel like every 2 years they try to do something new. Do you guys remember standardized video interviews?
Oh
That
my
used to
God,
be like such a big deal before COVID.
I
We
just
don't
went
remember.
back through an old advising PowerPoint that I had and I pulled those slides. I was like, oh, my God, that was horrible.
And that seems like 100 years ago. I was like, like what is that, right? So every couple of years something is happening, and one thing that emergency physicians are great at, one thing our specialty itself is great at, is we adapt to change very quickly. We had the application apocalypse back in 2020. We've recovered within 1 year, right? Like we're always making adjustments. We're always looking at, well, this change is going to happen, may or may not happen. We can advocate for or against it, but while that's happening, what is our plan? How are we going to adjust? And that, I think, is the primary question students should be asking when they are looking at their programs that they're interested in. How how are the programs navigating this potential 3 to 4 year change? What is going, like, are they ready for it? And with other things like financials, program closures, things like that, how does the program seem stable, right? Are their residents getting protected? How are they making sure that the residents are building their CVs and the most ready for the most unexpected bad outcomes with the program? I think those are the things that students should be asking for. And honestly, programs should be ready to answer, because we can't deny that these things are indeed happening.
And I'll highlight like that. This is not a new question that we've coached students on, just suddenly this year. We've been coaching students to ask programs, hey, so what's the process for accepting and accommodating change within your program, regardless of what that change is? What process do you go through to review your curriculum and decide, if change needs to happen there? What is the feedback process that's available for residents to the program? How does the program respond to feedback? Trying to tease out how responsive is your program to changes, whatever those changes might be, is not really a new thing. And so, yeah, I agree. Tony, what are you telling your students?
So there's two things I tell the students. One that I can say, one that I write as an email. So that I'll tell you the things that I say to the students, which is less email worthy. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. When a student asks me, Dr. Zhang, what are your thoughts on these like 3 to 4 years and all these changes? My answer is, I don't know, but I'm not worried, because you shouldn't be worried either. And I say that as a very blanket statement, but part of that is really imbuing the words that Jess Smith has told me when I asked her a question regarding like ASCIM and CDEM and CORD and our recommendations. And her solution is always be Tony, just tell them to trust the system. And she really means that when the students are like, which tokens should I use? Should I signal this? Should I signal that? And her answer is just do what you think is right. And the system is designed to work with that in process. And the reason is, and this is where it goes into the longer email version, is that program directors are all individuals who are very talented, who really want to make it work. Like at the end of the day, no matter what the rules are and the new regulations, I promise you, without knowing any of the program directors in person, everyone is going to try to do their best extract resources, combining H's and O's to make water. Like they will make it work. All right. They will figure it out. And you can tell that they are going to be on their ass trying to get this work when you see them for the first time on Zoom or in person. And that will not change and from your baseline interview experience. And I really mean that. It's like if you go on an interview and you realize this program doesn't seem to have their stuff together, guess what? That is going to apply at every single level, regardless of what the RSE is recommending. This is going to be a, do they have what it takes to keep the program standing as is? Like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I like this program. Then that should be your answer. Like, I would say that this is such a higher level change that the student's decision of where they want to go should not rely on this. This is why when the students genuinely ask me, Dr. Zhang, what are your thoughts? You trained at a 4-year, now you're at a 3-year. And my answer is like, I don't know. But I say that I don't know after considering all of the aspects that are in it. And I say, it doesn't matter how I feel. And you shouldn't, like, if it matters to you, then it matters to you. I don't think there's any data to say how these programs are going to behave. What's the outcome of the students that graduate from these like transitions? Because guess what? That data doesn't exist, nor can we predict it because we don't even know what the final changes are. So for me to stress out about this, to stress you out about it when you have so many other things to stress out about, I think that is just not where your attention should be. And as your advisor, if I don't even know how to stress about this part, you don't need to stress out about this part. And that's kind of similar to what I tell patients. If I'm not worried, you don't need to be worried. If I'm worried, you might need to be worried, right? That's kind of the like, is this patient sick or not sick? I don't know. They look fine to me right now. Is this going to be a problem? I don't know. But for now, I don't think you need to worry about it because there's many more problems that you need to be considered of. And that's my long and short version.
Tony, I'm going to add one caveat to that. Everything will work out as long as the student follows conventional advising, right? Be the best student you can be. And then everything will probably work out.
I could give you guys my usual spiel, but we're already 3 minutes past the time limit that I put on ourselves. So let's go into our rapid fire section, okay? Rapid fire answers. How do you answer these specific things for students, okay? So step one, complex one, both pass fail. For your DO advisees, are you still advising that they do both step one and complex one, both step two and complex two? What do you do, Ronnie?
Oh, damn it.
God, no, please don't take step one. Like, don't put yourself in a position to accidentally fail step one when you pass level one. I think just given where we're still not that far from the days when people didn't bother reading level 2 or level 1 scores, right? And only looked at step 1, step 2. We're really not that many years removed from that. I think step 2 scores will still help DO applicants. I advise about 30 DO students every year, and I still tell them like you should do step 2 if you think you're a pretty decent test taker. For those students who only want to do level 1, level 2s, I think that it's very viable, but I think we have to kind of adjust our application strategy to kind of individualize a little bit.
Tony, second question for you, rapid fire question. What's your target score for step 2 for the average advisee?
Okay, that is something I will have to refer back to the NMRP, which I pulled up for the first question, but not for the second question. Sorry, I would say on step 2, I tell the students there's the door opener score, and then there is the no matter what happens, you get an interview score. And I think the door opener of like they will see you, in my opinion, is like 245. I think if you can score a 245 on a step 2, usually the doors will open, and that they will. You shouldn't have to worry about it. I think they will interview you no matter what, but with some question mark of why, with your high score, are you applying to it? Is anything 265 and higher? People will be like, wow, that's really impressive. We're gonna interview you, but why that's really high. So I would say that that's usually my threshold, and I want to say that's based on previous data, but I don't want to mislead our audience. The other thing I do want to say in contrast to Ronnie is that I'm referring to the PD data on percentages. Specifically, I don't know if I can share the screen, but I'm looking at the data, percentages of programs using medical licensure exams to select USDO applicant for interviews. And I recall looking at this earlier, and my suggestion is that based on some of the, and I think this was only a small group of program directors who selected to answer this survey. However, I do think that many of these program directors still wanted the DO students to have a step one. I recall is that some of the suggestion is like prefer, but still do not require a score. And that's what the step, this is referring to the step two, by the way.
Oh, well, I was going to say, like, I'm with Ronnie. Like, I usually advise my DO students to just pass Comlex 1, but also take both Step 2 as well as Comlex 2, because I agree, unfortunately, we're not quite at the stage yet where the average, I can't even say the average, the majority of program directors feel comfortable evaluating you based off of a score that they themselves might be a little unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
So let's move on to away rotations then. So how many aways should your students do? Let's see fingers.
Enough to get 2 slows.
Now that's a good answer. Okay, break it down for me.
Mainly because for most allopathic medical students, you're going to be at a medical school where there is an affiliated EM residency program. In that case, you're going to get 1 home slow, so you only need 1 away, right? But for vast majority of osteopathic medical students or international medical students who are interested in applying to EM in the United States, everything is an away rotation. So the best caveated answer is 2 total slows.
Yeah, I try to fight this good fight. I really do. And the number, as authors of that paper that say you should only just do 2 slows, like present company included.
Yes.
It is really freakishly hard to convince my students, who I personally mentor, to say you don't need 3. But Dr. Zhang, I really think, no, you don't need this. But all right. So I will say there are caveats to the rules, and there are people who are going to think that they are above the rules, or they're an exception to the rules. Nobody's an exception to a rule, as once again, quoting Dr. Jess Smith. The thing I will tell students, and unfortunately this is where my knowledge gap and where I will illustrate my knowledge gap, is West Coast. West Coast to me, as Molly can attest perhaps from her previous experience, is like this weird black hole of, my perception as a clerkship director, of course, is that you can try, like if you are not from the West Coast, if you do not do an away rotation in the West Coast, you cannot likely get to the West Coast. That's just my perception. And if you do an away rotation at the West Coast, you will probably not honor it. Like these are my 4 fundamental assumptions of the West Coast, which is not founded by science, data, statistics, or looking at the aggregate slow
It
data.
is not actually true, FYI.
But it is, unfortunately, that is the hard part where people say they really tried to go to the West Coast and it's just, they are getting rejected. And I will tell you, just looking at my own personal school's data, we have not successfully had residents or, MS4s go past a certain latitude of the US. It is just really, really hard. And I'm looking at our match data. It's just like, it's genuinely, like as much as the other data doesn't exist, I know that the line stops here and nobody crosses, right? Like that's what I see. And the data is there for the exception of the people who actually say, Dr. Zane, I think I might have what it takes to be a resident on the West Coast. I will tell them to try 3 slows and maybe 2 of them being on the West Coast, because it opens the door. I mean, you look at the data on the what are the percentages of people, like this is the whole signaling that Alexa's presented, is the most likely way for you to get considered as ranked is if you interview, right? Signals are helpful, but the thing that really gets you matched is if you did a prior, or if you get an interview, is if you did a prior rotation there. And if you did a prior rotation, that increases your chance of being matched significantly. So for this,
I was going to say, I completely agree. Like I will frequently advise students. So yes, you need a total of 2 slows, minimum 2 slows. If you have a red flag on your application that we are trying to work our way through, then you might need 3 slows. So if you, by red flag, I mean failed a preclinical course, failed a core clerkship rotation, failed a step the first time around, or only got passed when high pass and honors were available to you in your 3rd-year core clerkships, then yeah, we're building the argument that, yeah, you might have had some issues, but you're good at emergency medicine. And it definitely behooves you to do an away rotation in the region where you want to potentially match to, regardless of the region where you're kind of originating from. For sake of time, we're going to move on though. Okay, guys. So how many interviews should students go on? What's the magic number?
Well,
10.
So literally I tell my students somewhere between 10 and 12. So that was like perfect.
well, here's the reason, like 12 for I think I'm going to date myself and the people who are on this video is that most of us did in-person interviews. I'm making a large assumption here. And in-person interview for 12 interviews financially and physically, it's exhausting. However, I think that mental exhaustion exists for virtual interviews as well. And I think there's only so many times for you to tell someone else, why do you like emergency medicine? And after the 10th one, you're starting to realize the programs that you know, the programs that you like, the people that you don't like. And it's like, I think that number is, you hit that happiness threshold right around 10 is like maybe basically 9. I think once you've had 8 or 9 interviews, you feel done, but you know you're not done yet. You're like at the last.
And scientifically speaking, the curve of number of contiguous ranked programs to your likelihood of matching flattens right around somewhere between 10 and 12 for the average applicant. And so it does not behoove you mathematically to go on more interviews than that. And so, yes, I usually tell my students you're shooting for somewhere between 10 to 12 interviews. So I'm going to throw up a graph, or excuse me, a table about how many applications students should be sending out in order to get that number of interviews while I have you guys answer this next question. So signals, how should students use their 5 signals? And for everybody who isn't aware, it is still 5, just 5 this year. How are you telling your students to use them?
You should send it to the programs that you're really interested in that you didn't rotate at.
As Jess Smith once told me when I asked her this exact question, I apologize, I'm recanting a lot of what she tells me. It's just tell them to stop trying to game the system. And I think that's usually what I tell the students. Stop overthinking it. If you like a place, use your token. Like that is it. If you want the data, I can recant Alexa's data on how effective it is. But to be perfectly honest, if you like a program, don't worry that you may not have selected it as a geographic preference back in the day when ERAS was there. It's just like, forget about it. If you like it, use it. If you don't like it, don't use it. The programs don't care which other ones you signal because they're not gonna know that you signaled other places. Like they're just gonna know that this is a prized commodity and you used it for them. I think that is the way it is intended. And the way you should use it should be that. If you have enough time to try to game this, you are misusing your time. And that is my advice to you as your advisor. It's like you are misusing this time. Focus on the rest of your classes.
To reassure anybody on the call who's still asking the question, okay, but what if I've got a low competitive student who only wants to send their signals to highly competitive programs? We don't have the data yet that tells us exactly how to advise individual students based off of competitiveness level. Now, that being said, it is actively in the works. So stay tuned. We are going to potentially have a more refined answer for you all about how to cleverly use your signals sometime in the next couple of years. But for right now, yeah, use them as they are intended. Ronnie, how are you talking to your students about the transition to ResCAS?
I think the big thing is it's mostly about the same as ERAS. There will be plenty of instructions. ResCAS is the company that runs ResCAS is very familiar with the application system, so it's gonna run pretty smoothly. The transition is mostly for us from the specialty side to be able to get better data, get better research to advise students and make things smoother, and also to make things a little bit cheaper for medical students who are interested in applying to a lot of residency programs. They will be slightly cheaper. So, but otherwise, I don't think it's going to be that big of a change for the students themselves. You register for NRMP and then do ResCAS, and it'll be okay.
A lot of the questions I'm getting from students are not so much how to go through the application process, but it's hey, I'm thinking about dual applying. Okay, well, if the other specialty you're considering applying to uses ERAS, then you're going to have to register and do everything for both. Or students who are worried about couples matching. And just to reassure everyone, both application systems file straight through to the same NRMP. Students who are couples matching do not have to do anything special or different outside of the usual kind of rigmarole of the couples match process. But from a pure application standpoint, I think they're going to be totally and completely fine.
One thing, this is not regarding residency costs. I'm actually going to bring us back to the signal. One brief thing is that I'm so sorry. I actually lied. I do tell students of different levels of competitiveness how to signal differently because I try to game the system for them. I just don't want them to game the system for themselves. For the lower competitive, I tell students not to signal reach schools. I really try to say, if you are a low competitive student, if you're an average student, please don't use your signal for the places that are not going to take you. Like based on your experience as mentors, if you know that these places typically take students of a different caliber and you know the student you're advising is not there, don't waste your token, right? Like think of it as like, what would your dean say if your student had the soap? That's the kind of mentality that I incorporate when I tell these students, like, where do you signal? And my suggestion's like, how mad would the dean be if I had this student soap because I gave them bad advice? So I will say that for the students who are not very competitive, I want them to signal the places that are at their 50th percentile, the ones that where they might not like, but I think that's where they should go. And I think if they can do a good job at those, that will prevent them from soaping. That's my personal take on using signals for students who are more at risk and how I use it. For the super achievers, I think the tokens or the signals are less effective in terms of like they're going to get interviewed no matter what, basically based on how well they look on paper or how well they perform. So I think that the gains of that is less. Anyway, I digress.
All right, we are like at time, gentlemen. So let's come down to our advising cases. So case number one is Mike. Mike passed step one. His step two score is pending. He did have to repeat one preclinical course, and overall, like total med school status, bottom quartile. But he did really pretty good in his clinical rotations, high pass and honors all throughout third year. What's your advice to Mike on to how to plan his fourth year?
Do really good on your EM rotations for your aways. Possibly consider an away that doesn't do tests as part of your grade. Because sometimes bad test takers who are good clinically get tanked on their slows because they bombed their MBME or their SAEM test. Possibly consider the third. This might be the student who would consider a third EM rotation to get a third slow that is supportive, especially if that step two score ends up being low.
Tony, what's your take? Same or different?
This for me this is an at-risk student. For the reason is that the at-risk part is not the honors and high pass. The at-risk part is that these students don't know how to explain this on an interview. They don't know how to explain this on a personal statement. These are the students that get ultimately they're like when they're interviewing, somebody pokes a hole and say, "Can you tell me about this?" And then they like freak out and they bomb their interview. So these are the students that on paper, if you ignore this part, it's all about what is their discussion with the deans, how are they going to address this on their personal statement, and what have they personally learned. From the plans, I think two slows is fine for this student from a slow question, but I think that these are the students that I need to have a nice 1 hour conversation, sit down and say, like, tell me about the system, like, tell me about your process. Why did you retake it? Was this a professionalism issues? Were the deans involved? Did lawyers get involved? Like, I need to know because I'm not going to have a program that doesn't know about this because you probably need to know how to rehearse your answers. So I worry about this student.
Definitely worrisome. They need to be coached.
I was going to say, I cannot emphasize enough how much taking somebody who has like a little bump or even a big, huge mountain on their application and doing some serious interview prep with them, how much that helps them in the long run. Not interview, advising case number two. We've got CJ. CJ doesn't have a home EM program, so he's on his first away, his first true EM sub-I, and he is downright terrified of a slow pedo. He's halfway through his rotation in July. He's got his second rotation that's coming up back to back. He passed up and Comlex 1. but he hasn't yet taken step two. He reaches out to you because this is his situation. And I will say, you are not his current rotation clerkship director. So he's reaching out to you as his advisor. He's on a different rotation. How should he approach this situation?
I would say focus on seeking objective feedback from the place that he's rotating at and focus on clinical performance. I think it's going to be very variable and probably negative how a program handles you treating them as a therapist about how bad they feel about possibly bombing, right? So I think focus on having a growth mindset, like, hey, how can I improve? How can I do better? I know you just gave me kind of like this passively positive evaluation about my medical knowledge, but no, seriously, like, how can I be better? And just keep focusing on that. And I think that is probably the best way to ultimately end up getting a good flow, right? And even if the first rotation you don't perform as good as you do, because quite frankly, you didn't, it's not a home rotation, and you might not have had as much academic rotation exposure as other allopathic medical students. Like, it's okay. Get raw feedback, right? And think about how you're going to do better on your second rotation and just keep getting better. What the data suggests is that osteopathic medical students tend to do better with each rotation, whereas it's the opposite trajectory for allopathic medical students. So I think that's the big thing I try to emphasize to kind of reassure them, just keep focused on getting better.
I've had more than one student surprise tell me that it was their first EM rotation, like halfway through their rotation with me. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I would have known that earlier, because we could have done a whole lot other, like, just bread and butter emergency medicine things along the way. So this is a student, I tell them, I'm like, hey, make sure that your program knows this is your first rotation. They're going to look at you in a little bit of a different light, which is actually going to work to your advantage. And they're going to want to help you along the way, especially if you tell them, hey, I'm super passionate about this specialty, but this is the first time I've actually done this specialty. Tony, what about you? What would you tell CJ?
I know you guys are texting me to be less spicy, but I'm going to give you a very spicy answer. I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like, that's what I was doing. Like, look, my tough Asian dad answer to this is like, all right, it's like, what would my dad tell me in this situation? That's very not what I'm going to tell the student. But what would the dean say is that I think the question really comes down to not how he could turn it around, is look at it objectively. Are you anxious because of your performance, or do you have clear, concise feedback on your performance that is making you have this self-reflection? Like, how are you self-reflecting on the fact that you are performing poorly? This is what I tell the student: your slow is not written as your slow is not written for you. Like, it's not created out of thin air. Your performance, your skills, your knowledge, your procedure acumen, that is what is reflected on your slows. If you are a student who has gaps in medical knowledge, then you are going to have a slow that reflects that. It's not like the slow is written to piss you off. The slow is written to reflect who you are. And if this is what you know are their deficits, then you need to shape up. Like, you need to read, because the slow is only an accurate reflection of how you are. The slow is not how much I like you. That's not what the Likert scale says. The Likert scale says is how dependable are you on this process. And if you want to get better, regardless of whether you're an MD or DO student, you need to know what the rubrics are. You need to read as much more than you are right now, and you need to have the expectation of learning what the rubrics are for your next rotation and to exceed upon it, and also let the instructor know that this might be your first rotation, but today you are going to work on differential diagnosis because it's been described by talking to the clerkship directors that that's something that you want to work on, and illustrate on the fact that you have things that you want to improve upon. I'm not as worried about providing feedback to the student, because I'm going to get what I'm going to get when the student's done with his rotation, his or her rotation. But ultimately, it's going to be a, look, my same recommendation is to every student: give 125%. If you can do that, then that makes my job easier. If you can't do that, then we have less to discuss.
Tony, I rescind your bottle of scotch for airing our dirty laundry in front of the entire Cord Connects community. But we've got one more advising scenario, okay? So Ash is a 27-year-old MD student. They applied to 40 programs and they have 7 interview offers in early November. They seem to have done fine on step 1. Step 2, they got a 238. They have 3 slows that they think they did fine on. And Ash is coming to you saying, hey, I'm a little bit worried about my number of interviews. What do I do?
I think at this point, it's too early to tell. So if it's early November and they have 7 interview offers, those are probably first round interview offers. And that's probably not that bad. As people interview and decide to drop interviews down the line, you're gonna start getting second and third round interview offers. You're gonna get off the wait list, and you're probably gonna hit your magic number of 10, and it's probably gonna be okay. Now, I think if it was further down the line, or if they're just really morbidly curious, or if you're really morbidly curious, and this is your own like home student, you could consider talking to your program director and say, hey, like, are there any slow ketos in those 3 slows from one of our students? And have a conversation about that. But I think at this point, they're probably going to be okay.
Tony, what do you think?
I feel for the student. I really do. And I really think that no matter how you want to code it, the student is going to really want a concrete answer. And I genuinely would like them to have at least 10 interviews. And this is a very dumb answer, but I try to say the day that they tell me that they're worried, I tell them email in 3 weeks. Like, doesn't matter what time it is. Like, I'm really worried in November. I haven't heard anything. You know what you should do? Add 3 weeks to this conversation and then schedule an email 5 programs that you really think are good fits for you that you haven't heard back, and see what their thoughts are. Give it 5 days, give it 3 weeks. You can schedule, send this email, and see if you need to do it by that time. Because I think that these students need some action. They need some reassurance. And I agree with Ronnie completely that November is too early for the fact that the second wave of ad drops have not fully kicked in, and the program directors and the coordinators had not had time to breathe yet. So that's why I'm just looking from the logistics perspective. They have not had time to like continuously recycle, and give them some time. Especially, I think the best time to send for like, hey, reminder in like, hey, I'm still very curious. Hey, I want to let you know. And I always tell the student, start your email not with a, have you looked at my application yet? But perhaps write it in a way that says, oh, I want to let you know I updated my application with this new award that I got. Just wanted to put it out there in case it has not been automatically refreshed. That's like a gentle reminder of I'm still here and I've thought about it. Do not email every person in the whole world. Like choose, this is like my second signaling, choose about 5 programs that you want to signal for repeat, because anything more than 5, you have no idea what you're doing. And really, I tell them, think about the 5 programs that you really wished that they contact you. And they are not the reach schools. I tell them to, you know, think about your reach schools. And I mentor the students. So I tell them, these are your reach. So I say, take those, take them out of the picture. Think about the next 5 set of programs that you really wanted them to reach out to you. That's the people that you really want to reach out to. And I would reach out to them in 2 to 3 weeks and say, you know, dear program, like, I'm really excited. If there's any opportunity for me to be considered as an ad drop, I will avail myself to all your programs. And this is also the part where I tell the students, please don't ask for an interview day and then be picky about it. Just, I've had students who do that, and that is that is less professional. Anyway, I talk to them.
It's great. No, we are, by my calculations, we are now 20 seconds past the hour. So let's cap this thing with a reminder to everyone on the call and to everyone who watches this video. If you are in a position to advise students, you are not alone. Nobody expects you to de novo be able to create answers to all of these and the myriad other questions that students invent every single year to ask you about this application process. Speak from your experience, but realize that there are certain facts that you need to know. So if you are advising students, liaison with ASCM, the Advising Students Committee in Emergency Medicine through CORD, and liaison with CDEM, the Clerkship Directors group, the Clerkship Directors of Emergency Medicine through SAEM. There are advising resources out there for you to use, so that way you know that what you're telling students is internally consistent with the rest of the specialty. And with that, I'm going to offer a huge and giant thanks, not only to Ronnie and Tony for letting me force them to have this conversation with me, but also to Mary McLean and William Dixon, who invited us to go ahead and do this session. Much appreciation to CORD for giving us this time.